What would you do if the person you loved and trusted the most revealed a secret so shocking, so unexpected, that it would change your life in an instant? Imagine being on your honeymoon, celebrating what was supposed to be the happiest moment of your life, when a discovery so jarring shatters everything you believed to be true. What if, on the night you thought you were beginning your new life, your partner's hidden past unraveled in front of you, revealing a truth you never saw coming? This is exactly what happened to Marcus Johnson. What he learned about his wife on that fateful night sent him into a spiral of disbelief and ultimately rage. This is the story of Marcus Johnson and Ebony Davis, a seemingly happy newlywed couple whose world fell apart after a revelation so shocking it ended in tragedy. What began as a romantic journey quickly turned into a nightmare. Ebony Davis, the woman Marcus had married, had a past that she had kept hidden, a secret that, when exposed, would tear apart their relationship and forever alter both of their lives. But this wasn't just about secrets. What happened next would leave a mark on the people involved, and the psychological effects would echo long after the crime was committed. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a crime born from deep emotional turmoil and psychological conflict. How far would you go if everything you thought you knew was suddenly turned upside down? Stay with us as we unravel the shocking details of a newlywed's fatal revelation, the consequences of hidden truths, and the tragedy that followed. This is the story of Marcus Johnson and Ebony Davis, a newlywed couple whose fairy tale wedding quickly spiraled into a tragic nightmare. In February of 2018, Johnson made a discovery that would forever change the course of both their lives. After months of dating and an exciting wedding, Marcus was blindsided by a truth he had never expected. His wife, Ebony Davis, had a secret she had kept hidden for years. But what exactly was that secret, and how did it lead to one of the most shocking crimes of the year? Marcus Johnson, a man from Cleveland, Ohio, thought he was marrying the woman of his dreams. Ebony Davis, a beautiful, intelligent, and confident woman, seemed to be everything he had hoped for. Their wedding was an intimate celebration filled with love and promise as they both looked forward to the future they would build together. But the honeymoon phase was short-lived. Just days after their wedding, Marcus discovered something about Ebony that would shake him to his core. Ebony had been living a life as a woman, but the truth was much more complex. She was transgender, and Marcus had no idea. When Marcus learned the truth about Ebony's past, it wasn't just a simple revelation. This was a discovery that shattered everything he believed about the woman he had married. It was a shocking betrayal, a truth that changed the entire fabric of their relationship. But was it really a betrayal, or was it something more complicated? Who? Marcus Johnson, a Cleveland man, and his wife Ebony Davis, a transgender woman who had transitioned from male to female years before they met. When? The events unfolded in February 2018, mere days after their wedding ceremony, when Marcus learned of Ebony's past. Where? Cleveland, Ohio. The couple had settled into their new life together, but the discovery took place in the confines of their shared apartment, a place that was supposed to be a haven of love and trust. What? The discovery of Ebony's transgender identity led to a violent confrontation, one that would end with Ebony Davis tragically losing her life. The psychological turmoil that Marcus faced after this revelation would ignite something in him, a darkness that he hadn't known existed. But what was it about this revelation that pushed Marcus Johnson over the edge? What caused a man who was presumably in love with his wife to react so violently? Was it just pure emotional shock, an overwhelming sense of betrayal? Or was there something deeper, something darker, that took control of his mind in that moment? In this case, we'll delve into the psychological aspects of this tragedy. What was going on inside Marcus's mind? Was his reaction a result of shock, or was it driven by something more complex? Perhaps years of internalized fear or confusion about gender identity? And how did Ebony, who had lived as a woman for many years, cope with the potential fallout of revealing her past to a man she loved? This case doesn't just challenge our understanding of crime. It forces us to examine the psychological complexity of relationships, trust, and identity. How did the tension between truth and secrecy become the catalyst for violence? How does a secret of this magnitude change a person's entire reality? And most hauntingly, what happens when the person who is meant to love and accept you turns away, unable to comprehend your truth? A city with a rich history of diverse communities, where the streets echo with the sounds of jazz, the roar of sports fans, and the hum of everyday life. But in February of 2018, this city was about to witness a tragedy that would soon make national headlines and forever alter the lives of two people. For Marcus Johnson and Ebony Davis, a city known for its resilience would become the backdrop to a chilling and devastating revelation. Cleveland, with its mix of old-world charm and modern sensibilities, had always been a place where people from different backgrounds came together. Known for its art scene, its passionate sports culture, and a growing focus on community development, Cleveland seemed an unlikely place for a crime so heartbreaking. But as the snow began to fall in the winter of 2018, the city became the setting for a tragic discovery that would break hearts and spark debates far beyond its borders. Marcus Johnson was, by all accounts, a man who led a quiet and uncomplicated life. A Cleveland native, he worked a regular job, enjoyed hanging out with friends, and had always been the kind of guy who valued loyalty and honesty in a relationship. Marcus had grown up with strong family values, and he dreamed of building a future with someone who shared his hopes and ambitions. His life seemed predictable, and he had no reason to expect anything less than happiness in his marriage to Ebony. Ebony Davis, on the other hand, had a story that was far more complex. Born as a man, she had transitioned several years earlier, embarking on a difficult and often painful journey to become the woman she knew herself to be. By the time she met Marcus, she had found acceptance and confidence in her new life. But her past that she had worked so hard to bury was never something she felt she could fully reveal, especially to someone she was falling in love with. She had been living as a woman for years, but the fear of rejection, of losing the love she had found in Marcus, made it nearly impossible for her to share her full truth. Their relationship began like so many others, a connection over mutual interests, shared values, and the hope for a future together. Marcus admired Ebony for her intelligence, her charm, and her beautiful personality. Ebony, in turn, was drawn to Marcus's warmth, his humor, and his unwavering support. It seemed like a perfect match, and their wedding day was the culmination of everything they had worked for, a joyous occasion celebrated by family and friends. But little did they know, the secret Ebony had kept hidden for so long would soon bring everything crashing down. Their marriage, which should have been a new beginning, was instead marred by an explosive revelation. Ebony had never told Marcus about her past. Despite the love and trust they shared, she feared that revealing her true history would jeopardize everything they had built together. She lived in constant anxiety, knowing that if Marcus ever found out, it could end their relationship. Her deepest fear was that the man she loved would never understand. But that fear eventually became a harsh reality. It was only after their wedding, in the quiet intimacy of their new life together that Marcus stumbled upon the truth. The discovery sent shockwaves through their relationship, revealing layers of deception that Marcus never could have imagined. This was more than just an emotional betrayal. It was a revelation that challenged everything Marcus thought he knew about the woman he had married. For Ebony, revealing her past wasn't just a matter of telling a story. It was an admission that could cost her everything. Transgender individuals often face immense challenges when it comes to relationships, as the fear of rejection, misunderstanding, and social stigma can weigh heavily on their hearts. In a world where society acceptance is still a struggle for many, revealing one's gender identity to a partner can be a life-altering decision. For Ebony, the fear of being rejected by Marcus, a man she had come to love deeply, was a fear she carried every day. And yet, she kept the secret, hoping that their bond would be strong enough to withstand the truth. For many transgender people, the fear of rejection is more than just a personal anxiety. It's a deeply ingrained reality. Social acceptance remains a significant issue, and even the people closest to them might not always understand or accept their journey. Ebony's secret was not just about protecting her marriage, but also about protecting her own sense of safety and self-worth. As Marcus's discovery of Ebony's secret unraveled, the psychological effects of this revelation began to emerge. What seemed like a moment of shocking clarity for Marcus quickly turned into a moment of emotional devastation. The emotional shock, mixed with feelings of betrayal, confusion, and loss, started to take a toll on him in ways he couldn't have predicted. And for Ebony, the lie she had lived with was no longer something she could keep hidden, but it was a lie that was about to tear apart everything she had fought for. As the days passed, Marcus and Ebony's relationship became increasingly strained. What had once been a loving and trusting union now became a battlefield of emotions. For Marcus, every conversation, every glance seemed to remind him of the secret he had just learned. His mind raced with questions. How could she hide something so important from me? Was everything we had just a lie? He grappled with feelings of confusion and betrayal, struggling to come to terms with what had been revealed. He wanted to understand, but every time he tried to confront Ebony, the conversations ended in anger, hurt, and more unanswered questions. For Ebony, the weight of her secret was becoming unbearable. She had always hoped that Marcus would accept her for who she was, but now she wasn't sure if that was even possible. The fear of losing him consumed her, and the pressure of their strange relationship began to take a heavy toll on her emotionally. Would their marriage survive this shocking revelation? Or had the secret broken something deeper within both of them that couldn't be repaired? The psychological complexity of their relationship became the heart of the tragedy that was about to unfold. What was it that pushed Marcus to the brink? Was it just the shock of the revelation, or was there something darker at play, a deep emotional and psychological conflict that would ultimately lead to violence? Everything seemed perfect between Marcus and Ebony. To the outside world, they were just another couple, in love, newly married, looking forward to their future. Marcus had no reason to doubt the woman he had chosen to spend the rest of his life with. But then, on that fateful day, everything changed. It wasn't a confrontation or a fight that led to the revelation. No, this was a discovery, one that would come to light in the most unexpected way, a casual conversation that would ignite a storm of emotions and ultimately lead to tragedy. It all started innocently enough during a quiet evening at their apartment in Cleveland. Marcus and Ebony had been married for just a few weeks, still in the honeymoon phase of their relationship. The newlywed bliss was still fresh, and life seemed full of promise. But during this seemingly mundane moment as they sat together, talking about their day, the truth about Ebony's past was finally revealed. It was Ebony who, after a long silence, broke the news to Marcus. She chose this moment, of all moments, to tell him the truth. She was not, as Marcus had believed, a biological woman. Ebony had transitioned years earlier, and her secret had remained hidden from him ever since their first meeting. She explained how, growing up, she had struggled with her identity, feeling trapped in a body that didn't match who she truly was. But over time, she had embraced her true self and undergone gender confirmation surgery. Now, years later, living as a woman, she had kept her past a secret from Marcus for fear of rejection. Marcus's reaction was immediate and intense. For a moment, he was speechless, struggling to process the revelation. His mind raced. Everything he had known about Ebony suddenly felt like a lie. He had fallen in love with her as a woman, and now everything he thought he understood about her had been turned on its head. What would any man feel upon discovering that the woman he married was not the person he thought she was? It's impossible to say how any person would react in such a situation. Some might find understanding or compassion, others might feel betrayed beyond measure. But for Marcus, the emotions that coursed through him were overwhelming. Shock, confusion, disbelief, they all hit him at once. This wasn't a minor misunderstanding. This was a truth that shattered the foundation of their marriage. In the hours that followed, Marcus grappled with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, frustration, and humiliation were some of the first feelings he expressed. He couldn't understand why Ebony hadn't told him sooner. Why had she waited until they were married to reveal something so crucial? Was their entire relationship built on a lie? In his mind, this revelation felt like a betrayal, not of love, but of trust. What could make a man feel so angry that he would be pushed to the brink of violence? Was it merely the shock of the revelation, or was there something deeper at play? Many have tried to understand Marcus's reaction, questioning whether it was simply an emotional response to an unexpected shock or if there were deeper psychological elements involved. Was Marcus's anger a result of the perceived betrayal of his wife's secret, or was there a deeper sense of betrayal tied to his own identity and values? For Marcus, who had placed so much trust in Ebony, the discovery seemed to strike at the core of who he thought he was. What did it say about his judgment, his ability to truly know the woman he married? As the night wore on, Marcus's emotional state grew more erratic. The confusion turned into anger, and the anger turned into frustration. He began to question everything about the foundation of their marriage, the love they had shared, and the life they had planned together. To Marcus, the truth felt like a betrayal that not only shattered his view of Ebony, but also undermined his sense of self-worth. He began to wonder, if she could keep this secret from him, what else had she hidden? Was she lying about other aspects of their relationship? And the shock of the revelation didn't just break Marcus's perception of his wife, it broke something deeper inside him. He felt humiliated, as though his identity had been called into question. How could he have loved someone who had kept such an important part of themselves hidden? The feelings of trust that should have been a cornerstone of their marriage now seemed fragile, even meaningless. And as the anger and betrayal simmered within him, the once hopeful love story between Marcus and Ebony seemed to unravel. But many have questioned whether Marcus's reaction was simply emotional, or if there was something more at play. Was this merely the response of a man who felt hurt by a secret kept from him, or was there something deeper within Marcus, some psychological fracture that was triggered by Ebony's revelation? In the following days, Marcus's behavior became more erratic, his emotions more volatile. He struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy as his mind spiraled. The couple tried to talk things through, but for Marcus, nothing seemed to make sense anymore. What once seemed like a perfect marriage now felt like an elaborate illusion. Was Marcus's emotional breakdown the result of the intense shock he had experienced? Or was it a deeper psychological issue, one that led to a fateful decision that would end in bloodshed? The question remains, what happens when emotional pain meets a fragile mind in crisis? What started as a moment of revelation soon descended into something far darker. The truth, once spoken, couldn't be unheard, and the consequences began to unfold immediately. Marcus, still reeling from the shock of what Ebony had just confessed, struggled to process the magnitude of her admission. The air between them was thick with tension, and what followed was not just an argument, it was a confrontation that would change everything. As Ebony sat across from Marcus, her heart pounding, with a mix of relief and fear, she anxiously waited for his response. Marcus, in contrast, sat frozen for a moment, his face an unreadable mask of disbelief. He stared at her as though trying to process the words that had just left her lips. It was as if his mind couldn't fully comprehend what had just been revealed. He asked again, hoping and praying that he had heard her wrong. But Ebony's words remained the same. "I'm a transgender woman. I've had surgery. I've lived as a woman for years." The silence in the room was deafening before Marcus finally spoke, his voice tinged with a mixture of confusion and anger. "Marcus, why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't you trust me enough to be honest with me from the start?" Ebony, her face flushed with a mix of fear and regret, tried to explain. She told him about the fear of rejection, about how she had spent years building a life in which she could finally feel at peace with who she was. She confessed that she never wanted to hurt him, but feared his reaction if she told him the truth. The longer she kept the secret, the harder it became to reveal, but now, with the wedding behind them, there was no turning back. "Ebony, I never meant for this to be a secret, but I didn't know how you would react. I didn't want to lose you." But Marcus, still in shock, couldn't process her words. What was meant to be a heartfelt conversation about honesty and vulnerability quickly spiraled into a heated argument. The shock of betrayal, a deep, gnawing feeling that his entire understanding of their relationship had been based on a lie, fueled the tension between them. "I can't believe this. You lied to me. We're married now, and you're telling me this? After everything we've been through?" The argument grew more intense. Words were exchanged in a blur of hurt, confusion, and anger. Marcus's voice cracked with disbelief, and Ebony's tone became defensive, but she continued to plead for his understanding. But with each word, the gap between them seemed to widen. Marcus could no longer see the woman he had married. He only saw the secret that had been kept from him for so long. In that moment, emotions ran high. The psychological weight of betrayal, of discovering that the person you loved and trusted most had kept a monumental secret from you, can be overwhelming. For Marcus, it was as though the foundation of everything he had built his life on had been ripped away in an instant. The overwhelming shock quickly morphed into anger, and anger quickly turned into something more dangerous: rage. Research on emotional triggers in high-stress situations shows that betrayal can cloud one's ability to think rationally. Marcus, overwhelmed by a mix of disbelief, humiliation, and hurt, may have felt as though everything in his life had been a lie. His mind raced with questions, with anger at both Ebony and himself. Was he the fool? Had she never truly loved him? Or had he been just another chapter in her story of hiding and deception? In these kinds of emotional storms, decision-making becomes impaired. In the heat of the moment, a person can act out of a sense of betrayal, shame, and confusion without fully grasping the consequences of their actions. For Marcus, this was one of those moments. His mind may have been clouded with feelings of abandonment, not understanding the full weight of what was happening. It is in these moments of emotional overload that people are often at their most vulnerable, capable of both intense violence and regret. Marcus's emotional breakdown during the confrontation pushed him to a breaking point. What started as a conversation about the past had now escalated into a heated, emotional exchange, one that would soon turn violent. As the argument escalated, Marcus's anger became all-consuming. He felt betrayed on a level that few could truly understand. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, was not the person he thought she was. And that unbearable truth was eating him alive, clouding every rational thought he had left. The more Ebony tried to explain, the more Marcus's emotional state spiraled out of control. In that moment, nothing seemed to matter except the rage and hurt that consumed him. What began as an emotional argument, fueled by shock and confusion, would quickly escalate into a violent confrontation that neither Marcus nor Ebony could have ever imagined when they first met. At that moment, the emotional tension between them reached a boiling point, and, in an instant, the disagreement became something far more tragic. The words had already been exchanged. The pain, confusion, and anger were hanging heavy in the air between Marcus and Ebony. Marcus's questions had turned to accusations, and Ebony's attempts at justification were falling on deaf ears. What started as an attempt to understand the truth quickly spiraled into an emotional confrontation that neither of them could control. As the argument intensified, Marcus's emotions of shock, anger, betrayal seemed to overwhelm him. His world had been turned upside down, and the woman he had married, the person he trusted most, was not who he thought she was. Was it the shock that drove him to this? Or was there something darker at play, something deeper beneath the surface of Marcus's psyche that, in that moment, took control? In a flash of rage, Marcus's emotions spiraled out of control. The argument turned physical when, in a moment of blind fury, he grabbed something nearby. It wasn't clear if he had intended to hurt her, but in the heat of the confrontation he struck her. Some reports suggest that Marcus used a blunt object, a heavy-handed object in his anger. Whether it was a bottle, a piece of furniture, or something else, no one will ever know for certain. Ebony, stunned by the sudden violence, tried to defend herself. But the blows continued. She cried out in pain, but Marcus was lost in his rage, the shock of the betrayal still too fresh. The violence escalated rapidly, leaving no room for words, only action. The fight ended tragically when Marcus, in his blind fury, struck Ebony with enough force to leave her unresponsive. What followed was nothing short of tragic. In the moments after the violence, Marcus stood over Ebony's lifeless body, stunned by what he had just done. His heart raced, his mind a whirlwind of confusion, guilt, and disbelief. How had things gone so horribly wrong? How had the life he had hoped to build with the woman he loved ended in this devastation? Marcus, still in a state of emotional chaos, didn't know what to do. He had just killed the woman he loved, and the weight of his actions crashed down on him like a tidal wave. He couldn't believe it. He had killed her. But did he know it was murder? Was it premeditated? Or had he been consumed by an uncontrollable emotional storm that led him to this point? The police were called to the scene after a neighbor reported hearing loud noises and what seemed like a violent altercation. When officers arrived, they found Marcus in a state of shock, covered in blood, standing beside Ebony's lifeless body. It was clear that the argument had escalated into a violent act, but the exact sequence of events remained unclear. Marcus was arrested at the scene without resistance. He didn't run. He didn't try to cover up what he had done. When questioned by the police, he was in a dazed, disoriented state. He confessed to the murder, though his explanation was filled with contradictions. Was it an act of pure emotional distress, or was there something more to his story? Did he intentionally kill her, or was it a tragic accident brought on by the emotional intensity of the moment? In the days following the crime, the media quickly picked up on the story, shocked by the tragic turn of events. Friends, family, and even neighbors were left stunned by the murder. How could a couple, seemingly so in love, end in such a violent tragedy? Was Marcus's reaction a product of emotional shock and betrayal, or was there something more deeply psychological at play? The questions surrounding the crime would continue to stir up controversy, and as the investigation progressed, Marcus's mental state would become a focal point of the case. The truth was complex. The line between emotional shock and premeditation blurred in this case. Was Marcus driven to murder by the crushing weight of his emotional turmoil, or was there something in his psyche that had been lurking beneath the surface all along? The court would have to decide. The following day saw Marcus facing charges of second-degree murder. He was later evaluated for his mental state during the incident, with experts weighing in on whether he had the capacity to premeditate the crime, or if he had been overcome by extreme emotional distress in the heat of the moment. The case continued to spark debate, and the psychological elements of Marcus's actions became central to the legal proceedings that would follow. As the dust settled from the tragic confrontation, the police arrived at the scene, quickly realizing that what had happened in Marcus Johnson and Ebony Davis's apartment was far from a simple domestic dispute. The aftermath of the argument was chilling. Ebony Davis was found dead, her life taken in a violent act of rage. The evidence was stark, and the police wasted no time in beginning their investigation. But, as they dug deeper, it became clear that this was not just a crime of passion. It was a crime that raised difficult questions about mental state, emotional distress, and the psychological effects of hidden truths. The investigators began their work with the basic facts: a married couple, a confrontation, and a woman dead in the aftermath. But as they gathered evidence from the scene, it became clear that this wasn't just a simple case of domestic violence. There was much more beneath the surface. Forensic evidence suggested that the violence had been unprovoked, and it was apparent that Marcus had acted in a moment of unrestrained rage. The weapon, a blunt object from the apartment, was found near Ebony's body. Police also spoke to neighbors who reported hearing loud arguments from the apartment, but no one knew exactly what had happened behind closed doors. Marcus was arrested on the spot and taken into custody. His initial statements to the police were a blur of confusion, guilt, and disbelief. He claimed that he had lost control, but it was clear that the situation was far more complex than a simple fit of anger. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the psychological component of Marcus's actions would play a pivotal role in the case. Was this an isolated incident, an act of temporary insanity, or was Marcus suffering from a deeper psychological issue? Some experts began to question whether Marcus's mental state had been influenced by the shocking revelation about his wife's past. Was it just emotional distress, or had something more profound taken over? Marcus's defense attorney quickly latched onto this idea, arguing that Marcus had been so overwhelmed by shock and betrayal upon learning of Ebony's transgender history that his actions were an extreme emotional reaction to the stress. His legal team claimed that Marcus had not intended to kill Ebony, but instead had acted out of a distorted sense of confusion and fear. The defense leaned heavily on the psychological toll that such a revelation could have on a man who felt completely deceived. The defense claimed that Marcus had been in a state of extreme emotional distress when he learned about Ebony's past. They argued that his reaction was a result of an overwhelming sense of betrayal and shock, suggesting that Marcus had been unable to process the information properly. In a marriage built on trust, this secret, this hidden part of Ebony's life was too much for him to bear. His attorneys claimed that Marcus had not intended to murder his wife, but rather had acted impulsively, in the heat of the moment. However, the prosecution countered that while Marcus's reaction might have been emotional, it was not enough to justify murder. They painted a picture of a man who had allowed his anger and confusion to cloud his judgment and who had taken the life of the woman he had sworn to love. The prosecution argued that while emotional distress could explain a heated argument, it could not excuse the violent act that followed. As the trial progressed, the question of whether Marcus had premeditated the murder or whether it was an act of rage became central. Was this a crime of passion, or had Marcus planned the act in advance? The prosecution focused on the brutality of the attack and how it appeared to be far more calculated than an impulsive outburst. Public reaction to the case was swift and polarized. The news of the tragic killing was widely reported, and many found themselves grappling with the questions the case raised about trust, identity, and the consequences of hidden truths. The revelation of Ebony's past, while a personal matter for the couple, became the focal point of public debate. How could a marriage that seemed so strong be destroyed by such a secret? Could Marcus have ever truly understood the depth of the trauma Ebony had experienced in her own life? And could he have accepted her truth had she told him earlier? For many, the case became a conversation starter, a debate about the nature of relationships and how secrecy can erode even the strongest bonds. On one side, people felt sympathy for Marcus, believing that the shock of learning about his wife's past could have sent him into a psychological tailspin. On the other hand, many argued that Marcus's actions were unforgivable, no matter the circumstances. They pointed to the extreme violence of the act and the fact that Marcus had made the choice to take Ebony's life. This tragic story is not just about one man's uncontrolled rage, but about the psychological weight of secrecy and betrayal in relationships. It serves as a chilling reminder of the complexities of human emotion, trust, and the dangers that can arise when parts of ourselves are hidden from those we love. Marcus Johnson's world was upended by a truth he never expected, and in the heat of that discovery, his response became the turning point in a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. The psychological toll of keeping secrets in a relationship is profound. For many people, especially those in marginalized communities like the transgender community, the fear of rejection is a heavy burden. Ebony Davis's decision to keep her past hidden from Marcus was not just about hiding her history, it was about protecting herself from the possibility of being rejected by the one person she had entrusted with her heart. Yet this secret, kept out of a desire to avoid rejection, ultimately became the catalyst for a devastating confrontation. What about Marcus, though? Was his reaction to the revelation truly a result of emotional distress, or was it something darker, something more ingrained in his psyche? As the legal proceedings unfolded, many questioned whether Marcus's emotional state in that moment was enough to justify the violence that followed. Could he have processed this shocking truth in a healthier way? Or did the betrayal feel too deep to overcome? Could this tragedy have been avoided? If Ebony had told Marcus the truth earlier, would their relationship have survived? Or was there something in Marcus's own mental state that made the truth too much for him to handle? It's easy to say that Marcus should have reacted differently, but when faced with such an unexpected, life-altering revelation, we can only wonder how any of us would respond in his shoes. The emotional toll of betrayal, real or perceived, can be overwhelming, and while we cannot condone his actions, we can try to understand the complexity of what led to this tragic end. In the end, though, the consequences were clear. This deadly secret cost 2 lives, Ebony Davis's and Marcus Johnson's, whose life will forever be defined by the crime he committed. Whether it was an act of temporary insanity or a psychological breakdown from an overwhelming emotional shock, one thing is undeniable: the tragedy that unfolded that fateful night has left scars that will last long after the trial. So, what do you think? Was Marcus' reaction truly an outburst of extreme emotional distress, or is there a deeper, darker element to this case that we haven't fully uncovered? Could this tragedy have been avoided, or was the psychological toll of the revelation too much to bear? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Was it betrayal, or something more complicated? And don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth true crime stories.